For what purpose does Mr. Jordan seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
So the Democrats have a bill that says to political jurisdictions, if you change your law, if you do it the way we want, we'll give you money. And our colleague from North Carolina comes with an amendment and says, if you engage in certain behavior, we're not going to give you that money. It is entirely relevant. The chairman has twice now used the term irrelevant. This is as relevant as it gets. Last week, the Democrats started off the week with one of our colleagues from Detroit saying no more policing. We just heard the gentleman from Rhode Island say the Democrats haven't talked about defunding the police.
No, that's not what I said.
One of their members said
I didn't say that we haven't talked
no
about
more policing. No more policing. And let me just, the Democrat-run cities, New York City cut $1 billion from its police department's budget and saw a 97% increase in shootings. Los Angeles cut $170 million from its budget, saw an 11.6% increase in homicides. Austin, Texas, $150 million cut, 50% spike in homicides. Portland, Oregon, a $12 million cut, eliminated 3 police units. Shootings went up 173%, murders up 25%. I would bet the people, the residents of those communities think this amendment is relevant, for goodness sake. Democrats started the week last week saying, get rid of police. They ended the week with one of our colleagues, Democrat colleagues, being admonished by a judge for the ridiculous things that they said. And somehow the gentleman from North Carolina's amendment's not relevant? Are you kidding me? This is as relevant as it gets, as timely as it gets. And I hope we could actually agree on something and adopt the gentleman's amendment. With that, I yield back my time.
Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Florida seek recognition?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I want to make it quite clear that this amendment is completely irrelevant. I served as a law enforcement officer for 27 years. It is a tough job. And good police officers deserve your support. You know, it's interesting to see my colleagues on the other side of the aisle support the police when it is politically convenient to do so. Law enforcement officers risk their lives every day. They deserve better. And the American people deserve. I have the floor, Mr. Jordan.
Lady has
What?
the floor.
Did I strike a nerve? Law enforcement officers deserve better than to be utilized as pawns. And you and your colleagues are ashamed of yourself.
The gentlelady will suspend and the clock will be stopped. I want to admonish members. They must not interrupt someone who has the time.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask
a
question?
You simply can't shout out. If you think that someone is saying
I agree.
Mr. Jordan, you don't know what in the heck you're talking about. You know nothing about what law enforcement officers do.
I know about my motive.
And you're using them as pawns because it serves your ridiculous political purpose.
Val, everyone must suspend. I am making the point. No one may shout out when someone else has the time. Not Mr. Gomert.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Not Mr. Jordan. Nobody.
Not Mr. Cicilline.
Not Miss
Demings.
He didn't do that. But nobody.
Not Mr. Jordan.
Not Miss.
Nobody.
Cicilline. Okay, no, but I agree with that. But
then how do we?
Everybody.
I have a question.
I will simply. There is no question. Nobody may shout out.
When you give a speech, Mr. Chairman, about motives and questioning motives, and then our motives are questioned, how do we address that?
The rules allow a request for words of point of inquiry.
Live and die, and you know nothing about that. And to utilize them as political
Mr. Chairman, I have a point of inquiry.
People will address comments to the chair.
Mr. Chairman.
The rules do not permit shouting out when someone else has the time. The only thing you may do when someone else has the time is you may raise a point of order if you think it proper, and the chair will then rule on the
point of order, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman will state his point of order.
So you gave us a lecture on people questioning our motives. When someone questions our motives, how do we address it when they're in the act of questioning our motives?
That is not a point of order.
Yes, it is.
That is not a point of order.
Mr. Chairman, may I continue, please?
That is not a point of order. Ms. Demings has the time, and the clock will resume. Gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I'm glad to hear that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are on the side of law enforcement now. Because I don't know where my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have been over the last 4 years, including on January 6th, when police officers who protect us every day were fighting for their lives because of the big lie that was told, and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle were silent. As one person after another person took the microphone and said, go down there and engage in combat, fight like hell. They used the bicycle racks as deadly missiles against the law enforcement officers that you all say you care about so much. And thank you, Mr. Cicilline, because you're absolutely right. The only person who voted to support local governments and passed legislation to support local governments that includes law enforcement were the Democratic members on this side of the aisle. But now today, you support law enforcement. Well, I'm delighted to know that. But don't support them when it's politically convenient for you to do so. Support them when they're under attack by people fighting them and spraying them and knocking them to the ground and beating them with poles, with carrying the American flags and pipes.
Unbelievable.
Mr. Chairman, I thank you, and I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. For what purpose does Mr. Roy seek recognition? I now recognize the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Olson, welcome. In America, we shouldn't need to say that parents speaking out about their children's education aren't domestic terrorists, or that those raising concerns about the radical direction the left is trying to take this country are not domestic terrorists, or that Trump supporters aren't domestic terrorists, but apparently we do, because the Biden administration is bound and determined to demonize anyone and everyone not in lockstep with their far-left agenda. Last September, the Biden White House colluded with the National School Boards Association to orchestrate a letter to President Biden that portrayed concerned parents speaking out at school board meetings as security threats. The letter urged the president to use the Patriot Act to go after America's moms and dads. Just 5 days later, the Attorney General issued a memorandum directing the FBI and U.S. Attorney's offices to address a, quote, disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, and threats of violence at school board meetings. And if you remember, when we had the Attorney General in front of this committee, we asked him about where did they learn about this harassment, this disturbing spike in intimidation? Where did they learn about it? And his response was, from the school board letter that they helped coordinate and put together to send to the White House. The press release that accompanied that memorandum said that Mr. Olson's division, the National Security Division, would be involved in a department-wide effort to target parents. That's right. The division that is supposed to be prosecuting terrorists, protecting us from terrorists, the kind that want to hijack planes and bring down buildings, decided that a priority of this division of the FBI is parents at school board meetings. And oh, guess what? We find out that this whole situation was coordinated. That's right. Like I said earlier, the NSBA letter was a pretext for the memorandum. The letter was instigated by the White House. Documents released by the National School Boards Association show that the White House knew that the letter would urge the administration to invoke the Patriot Act, and the White House raised no objections. In fact, the National School Boards Association admitted that President Biden telephoned the then NSBA president to say that he was appreciative of the letter. When this all came to light and America's parents rightly became outraged, the National School Board Association apologized for its action. The NSBA wrote to its members, quote, "We regret and apologize for the letter." That's a lot more than the Attorney General or the Biden administration has done, because as far as we know, the memorandum is still in place. That's right. As far as we know, the Attorney General's directive to the National Security Division to target moms and dads remains in place. And if this was it, if it was just a political stunt, that would be bad enough. But it's actually much worse. Because of whistleblowers who came forward, we know that the FBI created a threat tag specifically targeting parents, a designation specifically targeting moms and dads. And we know that the FBI opened over 24 investigations into parents merely because they stood up to speak on behalf of their children. We sent countless letters to the DOJ trying to get answers. but have gotten virtually nothing back in response. I'm sure we will have some pointed questions for Mr. Olson today, and I hope that he is prepared to give us answers on the answers our constituents deserve. We also hope he is prepared to talk about the Department of Justice's refusal to address people trying to intimidate Supreme Court justices at their homes and their children's schools. And we have great concerns about the terrorist attacks targeting pro-life facilities and groups around the country. This year, there have been dozens of attacks on these facilities, but the Biden administration seems preoccupied with other politically charged investigations. We'd also like to know why the DOJ is ignoring all the facts coming to light regarding the business dealings and illegal activities of Hunter Biden. In fact, a troubling pattern has come to light recently that indicates the Biden Justice Department seems more focused on politics than it is on fighting crime. And don't forget, this is the division of the Department of Justice that we entrust with immense surveillance powers. The chairman mentioned his reference to FISA. Within the National Security Division is the Office of Intelligence. This office is responsible for preparing and filing all applications pursuant to FISA, as well as appearing before the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. Of course, we all know about the FISA abuses over the past several years and how the Department of Justice and the FBI misused FISA to target the campaign of President Trump. Mr. Olson has been entrusted with a great deal of responsibility. It's our hope that today he's come prepared to answer a great deal of questions this committee has about the Department of Justice. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.